When we open ourselves to that which is greater than ourselves, that which we see as something more well-ordered than ourselves, and take that into us, that's actually what allows us then to be able to become that integrated organizing principle ourselves, because we integrate it and then we pass it onwards to that which is below us afterwards as well. So you were able to embody, but by stepping more strongly into that feminine, it actually strengthens your masculine as well. I'm Paul, founder of Maniphesto. Core is our online mastermind network, and this video is recorded live during our weekly community meeting. If you like it, then subscribe and check out our website if you'd like to join the next community meeting held every Friday. We're going to continue, guys, talking about community leadership on this meeting. We started last week with a really good conversation with Core and went into our chat afterwards as well. And what I really have got so far from this is that in order to understand community and to be able to lead in community, you really need to understand the way that reality lays itself out and the fractal nature of reality. And so the same dynamic, this is what we started with last week, is that the same dynamic that's happening on a community level is also happening at an individual level, where there's different parts to a human being, which are often pulling in all kinds of different directions, and you need to integrate those things into one thing. But at the same time, you have the family level, and you have like the city level or town and a whole country. There's all these different parts. And so as soon as something, a grouping gets bigger, then things lay themselves out in a hierarchy. Because without hierarchy, then a bigger collection of things that just goes into chaos. And to understand hierarchy, we also need to understand these words masculine and feminine. And so when I was speaking to Father Michael recently this week, then we spoke about, well, could we dive a little bit more into understanding the feminine? And that's what we're going to try and do today. So he's going to give us a talk, and then we're going to have a chat. And we want to give a bit more space as well today for input and discussion from you guys. So we'll stop the recording at some point, which we'll be putting out online, and then we'll just have a community discussion amongst ourselves about these topics. So over to you, Father Michael.
All righty, thank you. Good to be back, and good to see all of you. I think I know most of you. Even Dominic has resurfaced again after what, about a year?
Siena.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good, very good, very good. Yeah, just look over the names here. Yeah, most excellent. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was one of the ways in which masculine and feminine interact with each other. There is a kind of pattern that recurs over and over again. And this was first pointed out to me in actually in a biblical text. And so, as most of you know, I am a priest, so I get to start with some religious imagery because it's easiest for me. Take this not as a religious talk, but as examples of an archetypal pattern, which is reflected in some of the narratives and the stories there. So what I'd like to do is I'll just start with one, and then we'll draw out a few more, and then see and discuss how we see the same pattern working out in the larger world and in our own lives. So I'm going to start. I'm actually going to read from a Bible here. This is in John chapter 2. This is the very beginning of Jesus's ministry. He's not done anything publicly yet, still unknown. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now, both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus says to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother then said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were set 6 water pots of stone according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." They filled them up to the brim. And he said, "Draw some out now. Take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the wine, the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who drew the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the worse. But you have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. All right, that's the story. So that is, in fact, in John's gospel, how Jesus begins his public work. And the point or the pattern is that it began with his mother first coming to him and presenting a problem or a situation. So she says, well, here we are, we're all at the wedding feast, they've run out of wine. And he says, how is this my problem? And then in good Jewish mother fashion, she turns to everybody and says, do what he says. You know, but what we see what she did here, he's not had any public ministry to this point. And so what his mother does, what a woman does, is opens up a space for a man to act in a masculine way. She opens up and invites him into his ministry. Just like a woman physically, when she wants intimacy, will open her body to us to allow us to enter physically into her. This is the same kind of imagery you see. A woman is creating a space for a man to come in and to act. And I think this is one of the functions that the feminine serves for us. Okay? Are you following me? You see how we're drawing out the image here. Okay. Nod, yes. Not just blank stares. Okay, we got it. This is not too difficult to think. But I thought this was a fascinating explanation. And then I got to looking around other places and stories in scripture where exactly the same patterns seem to work out. Jesus is standing before Pontius Pilate about to be condemned to death. In all of the stories, Pontius Pilate's wife, or in Matthew's gospel, Pontius Pilate's wife comes to him and sends a message and says, don't have anything to do with this guy. Pontius Pilate's wife opens up the space for then Pontius Pilate to move forward with his condemnation of Jesus. After the resurrection of Christ, you remember who's the first person who finds the empty tomb after Jesus is raised from the dead? It's Mary Magdalene. It's a woman. She goes to the tomb first. She sees it is empty. She goes and then tells the other disciples, they've taken away the Lord's body. I don't know where they put him. And that's when Peter and John go running to the tomb and discover it for themselves. So a woman acts first and opens up the opportunity for the men to act. Okay, this happens later on in history. You may know that the Emperor Constantine, the Roman Emperor Constantine, was the first to convert to Christianity. His mother Helen had converted before him and laid the groundwork for him to eventually become Christian himself. Same thing in Russia. The great Prince Vladimir of Kiev, his mother had converted before he converted. So we have an instance of a woman opening up an opportunity for a man to act. Same thing with Saint Monica and Saint Augustine. And even if you will, we can take it in a negative sense. At the very beginning of Scripture, the story of the fall, it's Eve who eats of the fruit first. And it's a very curious thing because nowhere is it ever acknowledged that because a woman ate of the forbidden fruit, that mankind fell. It wasn't until Adam ate from the fruit that mankind fell. So Eve's action opens up the space for Adam to act. And it's a consequence of Adam's action that the rest of humanity falls. So again, it's always a matter when we're speaking about the feminine, what we very often talk about is a kind of opening or a kind of container or a kind of invitation, which allows for the masculine to act or to perform its proper duty. And so because it's kind of a container, the feminine usually kind of stays in the background. It's much more difficult to talk about feminine aspects than it is to talk about masculine aspects for this reason, because people don't pay so much attention to the background. They pay attention to the action in the foreground that the masculine is undertaking. And so the feminine is necessary. It's necessary there as a container, as a field, as an invitation, but it doesn't get the limelight. And so even in our own work as men, what we can look for are ways in which there have been invitations that have been laid open or containers in which we are able to move into in order for ourselves to work as men, and then to acknowledge those things as the feminine aspects of what we're doing. So I'd like to point out, like, one of the easiest ways that we can see this is precisely what we're doing here in Maniphesto Core. We have a Friday call. It is an exclusively male environment. We're able to come in here to be open and honest with our own hearts, forthright with each other in ways that we typically aren't so open and intimate with other people outside. This is a safe space where we can be open and honest and very real and raw with our feelings and what we think. But what makes this possible is sort of the container, which is the privacy of this group, the all-male enclosure that we've set here, that allows us then to step forward in honesty and openness, and in order to be able to talk with each other and to affect genuine change in our life. But the very structure of the meeting, the very structure of our core groups is what provides, is the feminine aspect of what we're doing here. And it provides the container for it. So that's kind of how, that sort of a brief lesson, but there it is. But I thought I'd offer that just as a basis for some discussion on how we see the feminine working in our own lives, how we see it working in men's work, and just to see if others of you have examples of similar kind of thing that you found in your own life.
Thanks, Father Michael, for getting us started there. So yeah, I'll ask a couple of questions, or we'll have a little bit of a talk, and then we'll take one or two questions, and then we'll stop the recording and go into more of an open discussion from with the entire community without the recording on it. So Father Michael, so obviously the Bible's a very archetypal kind of story. So you'll see women often in the feminine roles, there's all those examples that you pointed out, and men taking the masculine roles. But at the same time, and this is something we touched on with Jonathan, every man and woman is feminine in relation to some things and masculine in relation to some other things as well. So can you kind of connect the dots there to what you were talking just about that multiple side of things?
Yeah, there are always times. Well, for example, I remember when we have hot seats, in our core groups. Yes, Flores is a great fan of hot seats. Yeah, I've been roasted well in hot seats myself, and yeah, and they're very good. But you see, what you do when you are willing to sit in the hot seat is you are willing to open yourself up for the criticism and the encouragement of somebody else. And anytime that we kind of make ourselves vulnerable and open, I think we move a little more into our feminine aspect, and we allow then the other men to move into theirs. And so to be willing to sit in a hot seat, this is in fact a male mode of receptivity, which we usually associate with the feminine, but there is a male mode of that is not homoerotic and gay, and has absolutely nothing to do with sex, but it does have a lot to do with vulnerability or holding space. Or so that's one example. Second example is when, even again in our core groups, where a man comes with a serious problem or an issue, a deep burden on his heart, and he says, guys, I just need to share, I don't know what to do with this. And the rest of the men hold space. That's the common term we use here, hold space. So we just make a space and we hold that so that a man can emote and get his feelings out and complain or bitch and moan or weep or whatever it is he needs to do, so that in order to empty his soul, and we're able to hold that and to receive it. It doesn't mean we have to fix it. You see, and that can sometimes be, be a problem. No, we don't, because when we fix, we assume then the male role, and we return that to the man who's trying to be masculine here and give of himself. No, all we need to do is just hold on to that for him and to create a space in which he's able to empty himself. So even there, we stand in more of the feminine position vis-a-vis our brother. And also for those of you who follow a religious tradition, especially a Christian religious tradition, anytime we open ourselves to prayer, this is in fact a feminine gesture, because God is always the active agent in our lives and in creation. So anytime we open ourselves to prayer, is going to be a kind of feminine receptive gesture as well. So we move back and forth between these things, and maybe just bringing them into a little more conscious awareness might help us to fulfill them a little better, and maybe allow ourselves to be a little more useful to our brother when we encounter him, like for example in these meetings or in our core groups, when we know what our role is.
Yeah, so for me, this is where we tie it back into community leadership again, because communities have this aspect. What Jonathan said is that they center attention around a specific set of values or a specific principle or something like that. But when we become a part of community, then we have this interchange between a kind of a feminine opening to that which is above us as well and receiving it. And so you spoke really well about like the hot seat process. And that's where, you know, kind of like we kind of open up and allow others into a little bit of that chaos and the kind of things sticking out in all kinds of different directions. And we try and receive the organizing principles of the community a little bit into ourselves. But just in general, you use the example of prayer, but when we open ourselves to that which is greater than ourselves, that which we see as something more well-ordered than ourselves and take that into us, that's actually what allows us then to be able to become that integrated organizing principle ourselves, because we integrate it and then we pass it onwards to that which is below us afterwards as well. So you were able to embody by stepping more strongly into that feminine, it actually strengthens your masculine as well. And so, you know, there's an interchange between these two things. You know, we want to make strong men who can provide, protect, and preside. But in order to do that, then we need to have this private space, and Nokus, like I almost call it secret space, where we can do this work as well.
Yeah, and you know, this is why, you know, physical intimacy. Go one. Physical intimacy is always, you know, best done in private. See, look, Flores and I have the same issue. Cats want to be part of the process. But you know, physical intimacy is not a spectator sport. You know, it's done behind closed doors. There are things which other people's eyes don't need to be about, and things which need to be guarded, you know, in secrecy and all. And you know, I think that's one of the corrosive effects of pornography as well. You know, because it takes what should be intimate and private and makes it, you know, makes it open to public gaze. And there are some things that, like I say, I think, wasn't there a discussion, I think, recently about cameras and filming at, you know, like at the EMG and stuff like that? I think
it was actually Will Spencer from the Renaissance of Men who brought that in. We've been talking about it ever since. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I've seen references to it, but again, you know, it's sort of like let's you're taking objectives. It's almost voyeuristic in situations when men are being extremely vulnerable and open. You know, and we don't want to do that, you know, which is why, like you said, and rightly, we will stop the recording before we get into more personal discussion about these issues, because this is a public discussion. We're talking theory and broad stroke ideas, but we do not want to expose any man's own heart and his own intimacy, you know, kind of to, you know, the gaze of the mob, you know, that we feel is a violation, you know, and so we, you know, we hold that in respect. And that's a very good thing, and to know those appropriate, you know, those appropriate levels of access.
Good. So guys, yeah, put up your hands if you have questions. I think we'll take one question before we we hit off the recording button.
Well, I'll answer that particular question in the chat, you know, when we get off. Yeah.
The bodybuilding contest. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we're ready to, yeah, okay, there we go. Timothy, let's hear from you.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. So Michael, I have a question for you regarding the role of the masculine to actually make the feminine safe enough, feel safe enough, that the feminine opens. And yeah, I just wanted to hear your view on that, because I've been hearing quite often, and it quite resonate, that the role of the masculine is also to protect, to create enough safety, so that the feminine does its duty.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think yeah, to expand out on, you know, the particular image or the particular archetype that I used illustrations from the Bible to point out. But I think this goes back to sort of what we call the dance between the masculine and the feminine. Yes, the masculine we provide the protection, we provide the safe space, which allows the woman then to trust us enough to open, which then allows us to act, which then allows her to receive and, you know, and eventually to bear fruit and all. So yeah, it does. It goes back and forth constantly. And it's a beautiful dance. And I think this is why in some circles, and David Data in his Way of the Superior Man, you know, will say this is why polarity is so important, you know, in relationships, because the more masculine the man can be, the more the woman can relax into her femininity. And that's where the real dance goes. You know, and I maybe you've experienced that in your own life. Beautiful.
And
Thank you.
I think I just add to that and say, like it's just so important that masculinity comes from a space of complete integrity. Like it can't be faked. It can't just be a mask that we put on. So it needs to be a true integration or an embodiment of that which is good. For the feminine as well, and the feminine has a good bullshit detector. At least my wife seems to be able to do that, as does my child, who is in his feminine towards me as well, right? He can sense if I'm not there or not with him or in a bad mood. He knows, and so there's a very, very fine detector there. Good. Then I think we'll say goodbye to the people who are online, and we'll continue the discussion by ourselves.